The $1 trillion blind spot, why we celebrate Black women's hustle but refuse to fund their vision. Welcome to Soft Girl Era, the sacred space where strong Black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve without guilt, without apology, and without explanation. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, like sweet softness whispered in French. And I'm your guide from burnout to boundaries, from doing to being, from strong to soft and loving every second of it. Today, I want to share something with you that came from a conversation I had with Angela Lee, a visionary leader who has dedicated their life's work to exposing the invisible systems that keep brilliant, capable, visionary Black women locked out of the resources they need to thrive. Angela Lee isn't just an advocate, they're a disruptor. They're someone who refuses to let us look away from the uncomfortable truths about who gets funded, who gets believed, and who gets left behind in the pursuit of economic opportunity. What they shared with me, what the research reveals, is something that should stop us all in our tracks. It should make us angry. It should make us question everything we thought we knew about meritocracy, about hustle culture, about the so called American dream. Here's what we think we know: we celebrate the headlines, we see the numbers. Black women are starting businesses at record rates, outpacing nearly every other demographic group in North America. We applaud the hustle, we honor the grind. We say, look at us, we're doing it. And we are. But here's the part that doesn't make the headlines. Here's the part that Angela Lee wants us to sit with, to wrestle with, to refuse to accept. While Black women are launching businesses faster than anyone else, their ventures receive only a tiny fraction of the available funding. And this gap, this chasm between effort and investment, represents a massive, untapped economic opportunity for all of North America. We're not just talking about fairness here. We're talking about trillions of dollars left on the table. We're talking about an economy that could be thriving, communities that could be flourishing, and generations that could be building wealth. If only the systems in place would stop standing in the way. Let me say that again, because it's the kind of truth that needs to settle in slowly. Black women are doing the work. They're showing up, they're innovating, they're creating, but the money, the networks, the institutional support, they're not showing up for them. And that's costing all of us. Now, I know some of you listening are thinking, okay, but what does this have to do with my soft girl era? What does this have to do with rest, with boundaries, with choosing myself? And here's what I want you to hear: this is about all of that. Because when we talk about softness, we're not just talking about bubble baths and saying no to extra shifts. We're talking about dismantling the systems that told us we had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. We're talking about refusing to accept a world where our brilliance is acknowledged but not funded. We're talking about creating space, not just for rest, but for equity, for opportunity, for the kind of support that lets us build without breaking ourselves in the process. Angela Lee shared research with me that I can't stop thinking about. There was a report, a comprehensive survey that reached over 1,500 Black women founders across Canada. 1,500 women who are out here building businesses, creating jobs, serving their communities, pouring their hearts into ventures that matter. And you know what the researchers found? 63% of these women had to self fund their businesses up to $100,000. 63%. That means the majority of Black women entrepreneurs are reaching into their own pockets, their own savings, their own families, because the doors to traditional funding are closed, locked, bolted, shut. 43% couldn't secure any external funding at all. Not a loan, not an investor, not a grant, nothing. And here's the kicker: in Canada, only 0.2% of venture capital goes to Black women led businesses. 0.2%. Let that sit with you for a moment. We're talking about a fraction so small, it's almost invisible. And yet these women are still building, they're still creating, they're still showing up, but at what cost? Because here's what the research also tells us: Black women who are mothers, and let's be real, so many of us are carrying that load too. They're facing even more obstacles. Single motherhood is more common among Black women in Canada, 21.6%. And that means balancing business with childcare, with school pickups, with everything that comes with raising a family, often alone. Childcare costs eat up significant revenue. Networking events and accelerator programs don't accommodate mother schedules. And so these women are building flexible businesses, scalable businesses, businesses that don't require them to be physically present every second because they have to, because the system doesn't make space for them to do it any other way. They're not choosing flexibility because it's trendy, they're choosing it because it's survival. Now let's zoom out for a second. Let's look at the United States because the story is similar and the numbers are staggering. Between 2017 and 2022, the number of Black women owned businesses in the US grew by 71.6%. 71.6%. That's the highest growth rate among any major demographic group. We're talking about an explosion of entrepreneurship, of vision, of women saying, I'm going to create my own opportunity. I'm going to build my own table. I'm going to make a way out of no way. But here's the reality check: despite that growth, Black owned businesses make up only 3.3% of employer businesses in the United States. 3.3%. And Black people make up 14.4% of the population. So even with all that growth, even with all that hustle, we're still nowhere near parity. We're still fighting for scraps. We're still being told to work harder, to be more resilient, to prove ourselves over and over again. And the thing is, we do. We prove ourselves every single day. But the systems, the investors, the institutions, they're not keeping up. They're not meeting us where we are. They're not investing in us the way they invest in others. And that's not just unfair, it's economically foolish. Because researchers estimate that closing the revenue gap for Black women owned businesses could inject up to $1.8 trillion dollars into the US economy. $1.8 trillion dollars. That's not a small number. That's not a rounding error. That's transformational wealth. That's generational change. That's the kind of economic impact that lifts entire communities, that creates jobs, that builds legacies. So, why aren't we talking about this more? Why aren't investors lining up? Why aren't policymakers scrambling to fix this? Because here's what Angela Lee helped me understand: it's not that Black women aren't capable, it's not that the businesses aren't viable, it's that the barriers are systemic. Access to capital, access to networks, access to the rooms where decisions are made, those things are still gate kept. They're still controlled by people who don't look like us, who don't understand our lived experiences, who don't see our potential the way they see potential in others. And so Black women are left to navigate a landscape that was never designed for them. They're building businesses on personal savings. They're leveraging community resources. They're using digital platforms and alternative funding models. They're doing everything they can with what they have, and they're succeeding despite the odds. But imagine what could happen if the odds weren't stacked against them. Imagine what could happen if a Black woman with a brilliant idea didn't have to choose between funding her business and feeding her family. Imagine what could happen if she had access to the same networks, the same mentorship, the same capital as her white male counterpart. That's the world Angela Lee is fighting for. That's the world the research is pointing us toward. And that's the world we need to start building right now. Because here's the thing: this isn't just about Black women entrepreneurs. This is about all of us. This is about the economy we want to live in. This is about the communities we want to raise our children in. This is about whether we're going to keep perpetuating systems that leave brilliance unfunded and potential untapped, or whether we're going to do something different. And for those of you listening who are in your soft girl era, who are learning to rest, to set boundaries, to choose yourself, I want you to hear this. Part of choosing yourself is refusing to accept a world that undervalues you. Part of softness is having the strength to demand better. Part of rest is knowing that you don't have to work 3 times as hard to prove you deserve a seat at the table. You deserve it because you're here. You deserve it because your ideas matter. You deserve it because your work has value. The data is screaming at us. The opportunity is massive. The potential is undeniable. And the time is now. Black women are ready. They've been ready. They've been building, creating, innovating, and leading, often with nothing but their own grit and determination. And they're not asking for a handout, they're asking for what everyone else gets: access, opportunity, fair shot. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to look at your sphere of influence and ask yourself, where do I have power? Where can I open a door? Where can I make an introduction? Where can I amplify a voice? Where can I invest? Where can I advocate? If you're an investor, stop waiting for the perfect pitch and start recognizing that bias has shaped what you think perfection looks like. If you're a policymaker, create programs that don't just celebrate Black women entrepreneurs, but actually fund them. If you're a business leader, mentor someone who doesn't look like you, who doesn't have access to the rooms you're in. If you're a community member, support Black women owned businesses, share their work, tell their stories. Because when we remove the barriers, when we finally invest in their brilliance the way we invest in others, we won't just be changing their lives. We'll be changing the economy. We'll be changing our communities. We'll be changing the world. This is not a moment for polite conversation. This is a moment for disruption. This is a moment for action. This is a moment to stop celebrating the hustle and start funding the vision. So I'm asking you, what are you going to do? Because the choice is yours and the future is waiting.